Okay. Hi, my name is Kristin Polito. I'm here today to discuss the importance of building customer relationships and what you need to know about starting your business, especially if you are a PhD or postdoc fellow looking to use your skill sets to basically commercialize and monetize a particular business. I've had over 30 years of experience in industry and higher education, working in various strategic planning positions, running a venture capital portfolio, funding high-tech semiconductor and biotech companies. I've been an educator and continue to do that as a management professor at Suffolk University, where I specialize primarily in entrepreneurship and management. And I also consult with SCORE Boston, which is the Service Corps of Retired Executives, on advising entrepreneurs on starting and expanding their businesses. Well, I think, postdoc fellows and graduate students have been trained in their particular area of expertise. Maybe it's chemistry, maybe it's physics, maybe it's psychology. And so you're used to thinking in an academic mindset with preparation and research and scholarship, with landing a university job as a lecturer or professor. And that may change a little bit as your interests change. So you can certainly use these skill sets, but in a different area beyond the university, and commercialize them maybe through consulting arrangement or through lecturing with various organizations, and even monetizing, selling your research to outside research institutions. Could be think tanks and clients or customers that would value your services. Good question, Neil. So it could be psychotherapists that are maybe working at the state level or the university level, and now they want to do their own private consulting and counseling with clients. It could be, we had a PhD client that worked for the Center for Disease Control and wanted to design medical uniforms using customized software according to specifications for medical personnel. So it's not really so much lifestyle businesses, but people that are utilizing their research skills on counseling or consulting skills in a different capacity beyond the university or to develop their own practices. I'm part of SCORE Boston, and we offer a workshop called Start Your Own Business. And so there are different segments of that: entrepreneurship, the 8 areas of starting your business, marketing and finance in the morning sessions, and then in the afternoon the entrepreneurs can get together and be counseled by our consultants on starting their own business. So my responsibility was teaching the finance section and looking at different areas on building a pool of capital, either through equity or debt financing by borrowing through traditional institutions like banks or special financial institutions where a founder can basically sell their receivables, and we call that factoring, for instance. So that's just an aside. And then also insurance and liability issues that you need to look through. But I think in terms of starting your own business, it really is defining what it is that you want the business to represent, and what it is that you represent and how you can create value for a particular customer or customer segment. So we call this the value proposition. And I want you to think of value proposition as in one word, which is the benefit. So what is the benefit that you, as a PhD or postdoc fellow or graduate student, offer to that particular customer? How will they benefit from your services, and how will they utilize your services, how they will be attracted to what you offer, and how they will basically be able to use that and go back to you in the future for either future advice, future research information that could be helpful to them as you are providing a service to those areas. So it all goes with defining who your customer is. So we look at that in terms of how you can put together a customer profile. One of the areas is drafting who your ideal customer is. So looking at what is appealing to that particular customer, what would be ideal about them, what you would like to sell them or market to them, and why they are attracted to your services, and why they will keep coming back. So you can also do this in using your research skills through doing a lot of demographic analysis. So maybe looking at age levels, gender composition, certainly, location, particular areas, household income, personal income levels, and also maybe some psychographic research of, what areas are they attracted to buying, or particular areas. Many of us have aging parents, so is this an area that we're looking at services or that somebody can consult, with a postdoc fellow, graduate fellow background that has had a lot of experience in the research side on this in terms of dealing with aging parents, and just using that as an example. So it starts with defining your customer, building a customer profile, and then defining the value proposition. How does your research skills, your service will meet that expectations and benefit your future customer? No, I don't think.
Okay.
Now, I have an MBA, but it is not a prerequisite to starting a business. I did my MBA later in life. The advantage of the MBA is that it certainly helps you and saves you time on making maybe some costly mistakes in the beginning. However, with a PhD background, some of those skills that you've described of, looking at funding to help fund maybe your scholarship or research, some of those skills can certainly transfer into the business environment. The MBA, Master in Business Administration, is more of a practical application of, how do you use your background. You can spend 2 years in a business school full-time, or you can go part-time in evening-based programs and online programs, or even executive MBA programs that love PhDs, and you can structure that in a weekend format. Many schools offer that, especially several in the Boston area here. Right, no, it's not a prerequisite to start a company. I think Dr. Bose, for instance, didn't have an MBA, he was PhD from MIT.
Yep.
But, I think you can be highly successful without the MBA, but you also need to remember to seek out help. Do not be shy about seeking out help. So if it's from SCORE Boston, Service Corps of Retired Executives, maybe your institution has a business school where you can have one-on-one with particular faculty members that have an entrepreneurial slant or a finance expertise. I think that certainly helps. Don't be afraid to seek out help when you need the help. It all starts with an idea, and how do you commercialize it and develop it? Are you able to get financing for it? Do you write a really concrete business plan? And the business plan, you have to remember, is not for potential investors, when you first start off with it. It's for you. It's for you, and the business plan, like the U.S. Constitution, will change over time. It's interpretive, and your goals as the entrepreneur may change over time as well. But it's for you to give you some structure as to how you're going to create that product or service. What does a competitive landscape look like? How are you going to set up, a marketing strategy to develop that business further? What are your financial projections going to look like? And, how soon can you monetize and commercialize on the business? But going back to your original point, I think any time is a good time to start a business. You'll see many people over age 50, I call this their encore careers, where maybe they've gone through a recent layoff and now they're ready to start a business that they've always wanted to do. And I encourage people, especially with university experience, you have a very, very high level of skill sets and education that you can basically leverage, and additional education through reading, through talking with experts, through seeking advice through areas like SCORE, or through your university's Center for Women in Enterprise, for instance, participating in pitch competitions like the Massachusetts Challenge. Those are very, very instrumental in investment experts giving you advice on basically how to create successful business. So the U.S. government is very generous in the resources and services that it provides. So at the state level, that's the Small Business Administration, the SBA, and SCORE works in tandem with the SBA. So while the SBA does not provide any financing to bank loans, they do work very closely with local banks and community banks in basically guaranteeing up to 90% of a loan for an entrepreneur. So how that will work is the entrepreneur may go to the SBA for some advice, receive a whole set of resources on community banks that they can contact, and they may be able to, if they apply for a loan and they have a solid business plan and some revenues coming in, they may be able to get 1 to 2 percentage points decreased from what their loan would be that's structured. SCORE is basically the advisory arm of the SBA in providing counseling services and consulting services free of charge to entrepreneurs. A third of our portfolio are entrepreneurs that have never started businesses. A third are entrepreneurs that have just created a business. And then the last third are entrepreneurs that have been in business usually 2 to 5 years. Center for Women's in Enterprise, private nonprofit, but that's also very helpful, especially for women, that we see an uptick. 53% of SCORE's clients in SCORE Boston are women-owned businesses. So that's very helpful. As your business grows at the U.S. level, you can go to the U.S. Department of Commerce, especially if you're looking to facilitate international trade or areas of locations outside of the U.S. in conducting your business. And the Chambers of Commerce are also extremely helpful. It's a small minimal fee, including the American Chamber of Commerce in Washington, D.C., which can help not only at a national level, but an international level. The legal possibility, that's a very, very important question. So when I counsel clients at SCORE, that's one of the first areas that we talk about is how do you want to structure your business? Do you want to be or remain a sole proprietorship? We call it a sole prop. And you can certainly do that and have a very successful business, but you open yourself up to liability, and you can get sued, and a disgruntled client or customer can basically go after your personal assets. So your home, your marketable securities, your car, so areas like that you need to be concerned with. You may want to structure your business as a limited liability corporation. So liability is only limited to the amount that you have invested in the LLC. And disgruntled customers cannot go after your personal assets, for instance. You may want to structure as an S Corp and get the tax benefit on that. You would have to have no more than 100 investors as part of the S Corp, and you have to appoint a board of directors. But you and maybe 3 or 4, of people on your management team are the key people that are running the S Corp. And finally, you may consider a C Corp as your business matures, but you're subject to double taxation. So you're subject, if you have a net profit for the year, then you pay tax on that. And then if you distribute cash dividends to your shareholders, they also have to pay tax, capital gains tax, on the amount that they've received in dividend income. So that the double taxation is the only issue. Not only should you be concerned with legal issues, but also liability issues. So it's very smart if you're starting your business to look at purchasing general liability insurance for the business. You may have some homeowners insurance, for instance, but liability insurance will protect you against lawsuits for bodily injury, for instance, of a client you're in a service or transportation business, and also for any property damage. And then there are different degrees of different liability insurance, professional liability insurance versus product liability insurance for negligence issues. If you're in the medical field, as a consultant or counselor, we call that malpractice insurance. So it runs the gambit, and so it may not only be liability insurance that you have to look at, maybe it's errors and omissions insurance, especially if you're in the consulting field. Maybe it's to protect your copyright. It's also to protect you against personal injury from being slandered or libelous activity by, again, a disgruntled customer or client, that you protect yourself from those areas. And we do a lot of work on talking about these different types of liability insurance that are available. Best way is to identify a good insurance broker that you can use that can talk with you further or build in an insurance package. Identify that you don't know anything and you're not expected to, but that's not going to be a mark against you. You're just as you are in the academic setting, you're gathering information. And the more information that you gather and then you can structure it through the business plan, the better off that you're going to be from making costly mistakes. But never be driven by fear. Be driven by knowledge as empowerment and using that empowerment to help you build a successful business. Okay, great question. So it starts, I think, with market segmentation. So, how do you define the customer? We talked a little bit about that. Is there a need that you can fulfill that has not been done yet? So part of it is differentiating yourself and your product or service, and then looking at how you can meet that need for the customer. So again, it's looking at who your ideal customer is, what will attract them to your services, and how you can build customer satisfaction with the service or innovative idea that you provide. And part of this is looking at market segmentation here through your customer demographic and research analysis. And also to a certain extent, looking at, we call it in business school jargon basically the 5 Ps, or the marketing mix. So marketing is tremendously important to market research about who your customer is going to be. So I'll talk about the marketing mix in a moment, but what you can do is basically look at the market for this product or service, what your competition is doing, and is it an area where you can basically poll people? Can you beta test, if there's a series of 10 to 20 people that you're interested in asking them to fill out a survey, you can do this through SurveyMonkey and identify, they can give you mailing list of based on customer demographics that you define. Will they be very receptive to your product or service? You can also do this through focus group research, like we call this kitchen research, basically, where you can put together a group of people maybe you trust. Maybe it's 5 or 6 people, and you've prepped the questions in advance on using the product or service. One thing to keep in mind is that you don't want one of the folks in your focus group to be too talkative and take over the conversation. You also don't want to ask leading questions that, okay, this is going to be a given or this will be a thumbs up. You really want to get honest feedback from this focus group on whether they're receptive to your product or service. So doing survey analysis, brief questionnaires, beta testing the idea, with particular people that you trust, and focus group research is important in looking at how receptive people are. Also with focus group research, you get their feedback, and maybe there are areas that you have to modify on your product or service. So the focus group does give you a little bit of a reality check whether or not this is going to be a tangible product or service. So you've gotten all your research, you've utilized and leveraged your research and scholarship skills in a different capacity in terms of how you're going to commercialize and monetize your idea. So it starts with business school jargon that we call the marketing mix, or the 5 Ps, which are product, placement or distribution of that product, pricing of the product or service, positioning of the product or service, and the promotional aspects of the product or service here. So you've defined the product here. A lot of that you've done through grassroots research through the areas that I mentioned. One of the most difficult areas for entrepreneurs in looking at is the pricing of the product or service. Maybe, again, it could be a consultative service that you're developing. So looking at what the competitive environment is if you can talk with people that are doing similar types of research and commercializing on their skills and expertise, seeing if you can come up with a price. It's better to price higher than lower. You can always discount your pricing, but it's hard to increase the pricing once you start selling your product or service. So So you've defined the product, you've come up with a pricing analysis. You know, you want to look at how you're going to scale that. Is it just to people in the greater Boston area? You know, can you do some pro forma analysis on, you know, are you looking at a fee per project or fee for service structure? Are you pricing your services on an hourly basis? So the competitive environment is going to be really critical to, you know, what are the norms have been done in the past, and maybe you look at a different area in how that pricing is done. Google Analytics is a perfect example where when people advertised on the web, it was usually through web-based banners and banner advertising, and they kicked it up to the next level and looked at analytics based on a Dutch auction level, for instance, and people could pay for advertising on a pay-per-click basis, and put out a certain amount. They could pay per 20 clicks per day, or maybe they had a budget of $20 per day and $1,200 per month, and once they used up that budget, that was it. But you know, the founders came up with a very sophisticated way through a Dutch auction basis, you know, to price their analytical services, for instance. So this is just one example. So the pricing, the placement, you know, is this a service that you're going to distribute? Are you going to be working with other experts in selling this? Is this something that you have created a website and you're going to be offering a consultancy via the web? Maybe it's through blog-based services. Maybe it's person-to-person, you know, personal selling, you know, where you're counseling, you know, or sharing your expertise face-to-face with people. So that's up to you to decide how you're going to place and structure those products or services here. You know, looking at positioning, it's two areas. You know, number one, you want to look at what the competitive landscape is, so people that are already in your industry or your particular industry niche, and you want to look at the value proposition, right? So what value do you create, economic, intrinsic, financial, and also psychological value to the customer that you're marketing your product or service? And what benefit are you going to give them?
Sure.
You know, what benefit will help you in the further promotion of your business, which goes to the next area of is this something that you will promote through word of mouth? Is this through social media? You know, could you be promoting this by Google Analytics? What you're providing should be very real, it should be tangible,
Right.
and it should be something that you can describe very, very succinctly in a 30 to 60 second elevator pitch, right? And a lot of entrepreneurs that I work with are brilliant. They know their businesses inside and out. They know their industries. They're just not really adept at describing that and articulating that business idea, their description, and the value proposition within that 30 to 60 second time frame. Okay, so you always want to put yourself in the customer's position, right? So you may fall in love with your technology or your product or service, but if it's not going to meet the customer's need or expectations, then it simply languishes as a great idea, but it could be ahead of its time, or it could be late to get into the game, right? If people are working with more sophisticated technology or, you know, particular, you know, consulting arrangements here. So it starts with putting yourself in the customer's shoes, and how will your product or service really help to meet their expectations. So you can't fall in love with the product or service, and that is the end game, and that's the end result. Your product or service should be the bridge to fulfill the customer's wants and needs, you know, and what value it brings to your customer. Business plan is very important. Again, it's for you. It's not for your investors just yet, but to give you a concrete idea, you know, a plan of action of how you're putting the business together, who your market is, who your competition is, what's your value proposition, what's the value or service that you offer that's going to be appealing to your customer, and how you're going to monetize that. So looking very closely at your financial projections, how much money you need in a capital budget or startup expenses, basically, and how much you're projecting in an operating budget in terms of forecasting your revenues less your direct costs, you know, how much it costs to create the product or service. A product type, it would be cost of goods sold. A service, it's cost of sales. And then you also have to anticipate your indirect costs, right? What your selling, general, and administrative expenses, your overhead, wages and salaries as you start to bring people aboard to help you. And do you make a net profit or a net loss at the end? If your expenses are the same and match your revenues, then you've basically broken even. So how soon is it before you'll recognize a profit? Is it 6 months? Is it a year? So you need to watch those financial projections closely. But I think the most difficult area of the business plan is the marketing, and really defining that. So going out and doing the due diligence on who your customer is, and then incorporating that in terms of how are you going to monetize your product or service. So are you going to charge a fee for service basis? Will this be hiring people to sell your products or services on a commission basis, so basically as one distribution channel, for instance? Or are you charging on an hourly basis if it's a consultative type of service that you're involved in? And looking at the monetary projections, so seeing what's going on in your field and your industry. And one score counselor gave some great advice with it really is a very not a convoluted estimate, but it may be a little bit farther than a realistic estimate. So take 50% off of that, and that could be what your anticipated revenue stream is, within a 6 month to 12 month time frame.
Right.
And we were talking a little bit earlier about customer lifetime value, and I was reading some very interesting research from Shell Oil that defines a customer as you have external customers, or the end user of your product or service, and then internal customers. Maybe it's people within your division that you work with, and they have different expectations of your boss as a manager or academic, versus a peer that you're doing some research with. And how do you meet the internal customer expectations? Also, I think some of the best companies know how to basically repackage services and products into a very attractive format that keeps their customers engaged. So it can be through education, it can be through a free trial service of a new product or service that's coming out. I think another area for increasing and retaining the lifetime customer value is for, let's say somebody has received a defective product and they return it, and having pros be able to address those issues in a very courteous manner and a knowledgeable manner, and to be able to fix the product. That customer is 3 times more likely to stay with you and your business than they are to go off and look at a competitor because of that you value their feedback, and you're willing to bring in your expertise to resolve problems or issues here. So I think that's another area that retains and builds customer lifetime value and brand loyalty. Okay. So, building your product or service is a very sophisticated area. Again, your academic skills come in very, very handy in terms of the level of research that you devote to this. What's happening in consumer buying trends, what's happening in terms of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, these resources that you can use for free. And then, going out and doing focus group research, survey analysis, and then, building based on, what the customer expectations are. So, it could be, doing a rough draft of the design if it's a particular tangible product. And it could be defining a business process that you have in mind as you're building a consultancy, and how you will go about basically promoting this. So is it through social media is a very, very concrete example. Is it through Google Analytics, a pay-per-click basis? I have a former academic that was developing a travel seminars on the art end, and also for the LGBT community. So how he could take his academic experience as a professor of English and leverage that into tourism, and some of it very high-priced tourism for art tours in Europe and historic and museum tours, based on that community that would be attracted to that. So it also involves not just sitting down and putting pen to paper, but building a process in mind of how you will advertise and promote for these services. Is it areas where you can do speaking engagements with particular think tanks or areas in your industry through your local chambers of commerce, for example? Is it building a blog on your website on talking about particular trends that are affecting your industry and how your expertise comes into play with that? I have a client that wanted to sell energy and do energy brokerage through her website, and so how we could create momentum in yourself. So start with only one product, or start with only one service. You can build upon that. A lot of entrepreneurs, they come in with fantastic ideas, but they're also all over the place. So discipline yourself to start off with the one product or service that you think will basically have the most bang for the buck, so to speak. And that will create a following for you, because your resources will be very limited. It may just be you in the beginning. Maybe you might have a couple of partners that have done freelance work with you. That happens a lot in the graphic design community. But putting your heads together, and also the roles and responsibilities that you want to assume. Is there somebody that's very good on the operations side and building the internal workings of the business, versus somebody that can do the marketing and promotion of the business, versus somebody that is the creative director? That you can do both, but the advantage of the team is you have basically more bodies that can help you to deliver on that product or service. So let's say you have yourself and two team members. Okay, so you have threefold resources, versus you as the majority of one, trying to do all the work of the marketing, the promotion, and creating the concept and commercializing it. Both can work, but if you have team members that you can rely on, it just really takes out a lot of the angst, I think, of the work involved. But it's also a matter of being on the same page. So as you're building the business, how much equity will you take versus your 2 or 3 team members? How much will they be involved? And also having a very serious and real discussion about the roles and responsibilities that each team member will bring to the equation. If you don't have that up front, you're going to have a lot of angst and a lot of difficulty in building the business. Okay. So you're now at a point where you are profitable. And what is the next step in terms of scalability? So is it introducing a greater number of products within your product line or service? Do you want to expand on a region per region basis, let's say beyond Greater Boston, or identifying metropolitan operations and populations similar to the Greater Boston area? I'm just using that as an example. Are you looking at particular distribution channels? So not only end users, but maybe liaisons or agents that can help you leverage and promote the business. So you see this a lot in the insurance industry, where you'll have insurance brokers selling several different types of insurance, or for several different types of insurance carriers. So all those are important in terms of scaling the business. So how far do you want to expand? But it first starts off with looking at the market. How big is your market? Is it a $20 million market, or is it a $100 million market? And who are the top 5 players involved? Right? They may not match your products or services apples to apples, but there's a reason why they have a good context and a good section of the market share of the industry. So looking how big your market is, and where you plan to penetrate and capture market share if you can. The only way you will create market share is if you're offering a very, much more innovative product or service than you originally anticipated or what you've done in the past. I think, giving them alternatives of, particular areas that they can utilize their academic expertise into industry. It could be working in a think tank situation and, or going out on their own and doing consulting services. It could be working in different aspects of the federal or state government that is pleading for people, with, the academic skill sets here. And certainly it can be, encouraging them to not only have the entrepreneurial mindset if they wanted to start their own business, but an entrepreneurial mindset that they can look at hidden opportunities in outside organizations that they may go to work for. Financial services institutions have hired a number of PhDs, especially in economics and finance, because they have very, very highly skilled and highly attractive research skill sets and quantitative skill sets that could be very attractive. My advice for the PhD is do not be discouraged. There are very lively and sustainable careers outside of traditional academia. They do make use of the research skills. It could be if you're on the systems side, you go to work for a think tank like the Gartner Group, which is all about technology. And there are many, smaller firms like that. Or you have, a highly educated medical background. And biotech really interests you, so you could go to work for a nonprofit like the Massachusetts Biotech Council. And you have not only hundreds of biotech companies at your fingertips, but also more than 1,000 biotech and medical suppliers, and where you can utilize those skill sets. So I think it's also having an entrepreneurial mindset of how you can create opportunities for yourself beyond traditional university and higher education life, because what you have is very enviable. I think of this, the U.S. country's population, there are only 1% that are PhDs. So rather than looking at that as a hindrance, if you don't get an academic teaching or research position, look at it as a competitive advantage and how you utilize your expertise and skill sets in a different area. It could be business, it could be a think tank.